guys, welcome back to That Was the Week That Was, week 12, and I'm here again with Vince from Nelson, New Zealand. How are you, Vince?
Hey Bob, I'm doing really well. We've just gone past the autumn equinox now, so this is the first of our shows to take place in the darkest half of the year.
Ooh, and it's getting pretty dark out there.
Starting to get dark.
Let us begin our show, Vince, with another dark moment in politics, I would say. Going to just talk about the Let Women Speak tour, where Posie Parker tried to speak in Auckland. What is wrong with New Zealand protesters that they throw things at people? She was chased off the stage with tomato juice.
I think things have just become extremely feral in recent years, and you see this with, for example, the rise in gang members. I don't think there were any gang members present at this particular protest or counter protest, but the mentality that lies behind gang membership was definitely evident. You saw a lot of savagery. The supposedly pro-trans protesters, the supposedly anti-hate protesters, were throwing a lot of hate, among other things, and it really just seemed like a feral and crazed mob, like the sort of thing you might see in somewhere in darkest parts of Africa. So I was horrified as a New Zealander to see that this is the level to which debate has sunk. But we've seen that you're not really allowed to talk anymore unless what you have to say has the prior approval of the control system.
Yeah, it's just actually quite. I never thought that in my whole life that I would see this happen to free speech. I thought it was a given.
Well, what's really flipped in my observation is that the left used to be the strongest supporters of free speech. Like in the 1990s, they were supporting the free speech of video games to have violence in them, and the free speech of rappers, for example, to rap about what they wanted, and horror films and so on. But then things just totally flipped, and then the left became the authoritarians, which they are now when it comes to free speech.
All right, let's talk about another thing, Vince, that's pretty scary, which is that there has been a loss of $1 trillion from some of the smaller banks in America. And most people are withdrawing their money from the small banks, putting them into bigger, safer banks. But on Friday, we also saw that Deutsche Bank, the shares, plunged dramatically. So this thing of we're safe and secure is not really true, is it?
It's not true, even by the standards of the American banking system, which can just print up basically as much money as they like, and then it eventually filters through to the rest of the world. Even by their standards, $1 trillion is a lot of money, and it's going to mean that there's a lot of banks out there now that are possibly insolvent, in the sense that if people tried to withdraw all their funds, the bank wouldn't be able to pay them back. So there's definitely the extreme possibility, more possibility than at any time since 2007, 2008, of a widespread banking contagion, which is going to involve potentially a number of banks going under, or in any case, it's all being consolidated into a small number of major banks, which I think is the real horror scenario from the point of view of people who understand that the political system is to a large extent the bankers against the rest of us.
Yes. Do you think that it will come to New Zealand?
It'll certainly come to New Zealand, but I think it'll begin in the United States like it did in 2007.
Mm.
You see what's happened with the Silicon Valley Bank and the Signature Bank. If that does become more contagious and other banks start going down, the share prices start collapsing, then I think we'll see it come to one of the major banks in New Zealand, and that would be a great shock.
Terrible. On Twitter, there is a fellow called Hassan Mafi, who is a member of the Islamic Republic of Iran, who is posting quite violent videos of police brutality on the streets of France. That is another shocking thing. If that was happening in Russia, imagine the outcry.
I don't think most people in the West have properly appreciated the extent to which France, or French society in particular, has decayed massively over the last 30 to 40 years. Some French generals have been warning in the mainstream media over there of the possibility of civil war. People reject it because they think they're so used to peace in Western countries. But there's actually an extremely high amount of discontent among the French population towards their ruling class. And we've seen that this week. We've seen that with Emmanuel Macron. He set the police in to bash the people who really have got a good reason to be protesting. It's not just the fact that the pension age is going to go up from 62 to 64, but that the way that Macron passed this law was to invoke a specific law in the French constitution, which means that they can basically override the rest of the checks and balances system. And the people are protesting against that because that really is tyranny. But I don't think Macron's going to let go easily, because he knows that he's part of the globalist control system, and that the rest of the media and all the institutions have his back essentially against the French people. So I think he's going to cling to power for a long while yet.
During the Second World War, the Americans and the New Zealanders attempted to make a tsunami bomb, and they gave up because it was impossible. And now the Koreans have made a tsunami submarine where the New Zealanders and the Americans failed.
I think that you can really see now George Orwell's prediction of a world divided into three blocks that were fighting in Europe and fighting in Southeast Asia. You can really see that starting to come true. The conflict in the South China Sea in particular continues to ramp up. There continues to be great amounts of money being spent on, in particular, submarine warfare. We see now that Australia has just committed over $350 billion Australian dollars worth of funding to buy nuclear-powered submarines from their AUKUS partners. So they're going basically all in on the possibility of war with China, and America and Britain are also right behind them. We've just seen now that they've started forming what's called the Quadrilateral, which is an alliance of Australia, Japan, Britain, and the United States. And really, it's an anti-China alliance, and they want to add India to this as well. So you can see that the battle lines for World War III that we've seen being fought in Europe for the past year are starting to be drawn in the Eastern Hemisphere as well.
Sometime later this year, we are going to be having an election. But before this election, we have our dear old Winston Peters, bless his heart, gave us a State of the Union address this past week, in which he said that there was a conniving cultural cabal which was using the Maori language to further their own agenda. Do you think he's trolling? What is going on with him?
He's not trolling. He is very close, more close than anybody else to the real pulse of the nation. And he understands that a lot of people are tired of having Maori language pushed on them in places where there's no real advantage. I'm not talking about Maori television or Te Karere or so, but I'm talking about names of institutions being renamed to Maori names that people wouldn't know unless they already spoke Maori. It feels like a humiliation. And Peters is aware that there's a lot of people out there who feel like this, and they're not actually racist people, because if they were, they wouldn't be voting for Maori in the first place. I mean, Winston Peters is a Maori leader. So he knows that there's a lot of angry people out there, and I think he's predicting that that's going to boil over later this year so that he'll get over the 5% in the election. He's already polling at about 3 or 4%. So he only needs a little bit of extra support from one such issue that he can paint the rest of the parliament as not being interested in, and he could get over 5% very easily. So he'll be campaigning hard on things like this for the rest of the year, I'd imagine.
We are in some extreme times. We really are.
Yeah, that's for certain. I think times are going to get crazier, but it's still interesting to look back on the week that was and see just what we did have already.
Indeed, indeed. Well, Vince, thank you very much for joining us, and I will see you again next week.
Cheers, Bob. Take it easy.
The alt centre are clown world's good guys. They don't fit into boxes neatly enough to be someone else's tools.